So you heard it, didn't you? That deafening quiet that screams louder than any accusation. That absence of sound when you enter spaces where you know your name was just spoken. That sudden shift in energy, that deliberate silence that wraps around you like a straitjacket made of unspoken words. They told you it was nothing. They said you were being sensitive. They dismissed it as coincidence. But somewhere in that place beneath your ribs, in that chamber where truth echoes before your mind can rationalize it away, you knew. You absolutely knew. They were talking, and the moment you arrived, they stopped. And that silence, that calculated absence of words, it told you more than any conversation ever could. Before I continue, let me ask you something. Have you felt this? That knowing that can't be explained? If this resonates with something in your chest, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what I'm about to reveal, most people will never have the courage to speak out loud. And if you're still here, if you're still reading, you're not most people. You're someone who's ready to see what others refuse to acknowledge. You weren't supposed to notice the patterns. You weren't supposed to develop the kind of awareness that picks up on micro silences and strategic topic changes. You weren't supposed to train your consciousness to read the invisible, to hear what isn't said, to feel the weight of conversations that vanish the second you cross the threshold. But something in your wiring refused to stay dormant. Something in your perception activated without authorization. And now you're walking through life with sensors so refined they detect the absence of things. The spaces where truth should exist but has been carefully evacuated. Let me tell you what's really been happening. They've been discussing you far more than you realize. Not with malice, not always. Sometimes with concern that feels like chains. Sometimes with curiosity that feels like dissection. Sometimes with fascination that feels like being under glass. Every gathering you weren't invited to, your name appeared. Every conversation you interrupted, you were the subject. Every silence you created by arriving, you were the topic they were protecting you from hearing. And here's what makes it unbearable. They weren't excluding you because you're irrelevant. They were excluding you because you're central, because you're the question they can't answer, because you're the equation that doesn't balance, because your existence disrupts their comfortable narratives about how reality should function. You are the unsolvable problem in their otherwise predictable world, the variable that won't behave, the element that contaminates their controlled experiments with authenticity. And your refusal to perform the role they've written for you, your insistence on being complex when they need you simple, your determination to be multidimensional when they require you flat, that makes you the most dangerous person in every room you enter. So they talk, and they analyze, and they send representatives to extract information, disguised as friends, asking innocent questions. But every agent they dispatch returns with the same report. We still don't understand them. We still can't predict them. We still can't find the mechanism that makes them work. You thought you were losing your mind, didn't you? When you'd walk into rooms and feel the air change texture. When you'd sense conversations evaporating around you like morning fog. When you'd catch that fraction of a second where someone's face showed truth before their training took over and reconstructed the appropriate expression. You interrogated yourself endlessly. Am I paranoid? Am I fabricating patterns? Am I creating problems where none exist? And that's precisely what they needed. They needed you drowning in self-doubt, questioning your perception, pathologizing your intuition. Because a person who trusts their senses is ungovernable. A person who believes their instincts is uncontrollable. A person who knows what they know without requiring external validation is untouchable. But your instinct, that ancient detection system, hardwired into your survival mechanism, it refused to be silenced. It kept transmitting signals. Even when you tried to override it with logic, with rationality, with the desperate desire to be wrong, it kept pointing to the inconsistencies. The too quick topic changes. The rehearsed feeling conversations. The moments when reality seemed to skip like a scratched recording. And every time you noticed, every time you felt that sensation of being the subject of absent discussions, you weren't mistaken. You were receiving accurate data that most people's systems have been conditioned to filter out. But yours remained wild, remained vigilant, remained dangerously operational. Here's what they miscalculated. They assumed the silence would diminish you. They believed that being excluded from conversations about yourself would make you uncertain, would make you question your worth, would make you small enough to fit into their predetermined boxes. But something unexpected occurred. You didn't contract, you expanded. You became more authentically yourself, more unapologetically present, more powerfully unedited. Because somewhere in your consciousness, you processed information that transformed everything. You understood that if they're going to discuss you regardless, if they're going to analyze you without your permission, then you might as well give them something genuinely worth discussing. You might as well become so undeniably yourself that their conversations become exercises in futility, because they can talk all they want, but they'll never comprehend the source code. They'll never decode where your power originates, because your power doesn't emerge from their approval. It manifests from being talked about and not requiring their words to define you. You transformed their gossip into fuel. You converted their analysis into evidence of your significance. You weaponized their silence by refusing to let it erase you. You showed them everything, unfiltered and unashamed. Your contradictions, your complexities, your darkness, your light, your anger, your vulnerability, all of it, undiluted. And that shattered their entire framework, because they were searching for simple explanations. But all they discovered was depth they couldn't measure. They wanted to find your weaknesses to catalog, but you'd already integrated them into your strength. They needed to locate your control mechanisms, but you deactivated all external access points. Let's discuss what happened when you started honoring that knowing. When you stopped dismissing your awareness as oversensitivity and started treating it as the sophisticated intelligence gathering system it actually is. Suddenly everything crystallized, didn't it? The person who always seemed present during your vulnerable moments. The encounters that felt choreographed. The questions that probed too specifically, as though someone was harvesting data. The individuals in your life who possessed knowledge about you they couldn't have acquired organically, who would reference private thoughts you'd never externalized, who seemed to be reading from a script someone else had written. You began recognizing the rhythms, the way certain people would cycle in and out of your existence, always during transitional periods, always when you were approaching transformation, always positioning themselves as supporters while leaving devastation in their wake. You started noticing how your emotional state would deteriorate after specific interactions, how your clarity would dissolve, how your certainty would be replaced with confusion and self-questioning. And once you perceived the architecture, once you truly saw the construction of the game being played, you couldn't return to blindness. The curtain didn't just lift, it incinerated. And suddenly you were navigating a reality where you could see the machinery, the operators, the carefully scripted reality, and nothing appeared the same. They're destabilized now. Have you registered the shift? The energy transformed the moment you stopped pretending ignorance, the moment you stopped performing obliviousness to their discussions, the moment your eyes changed and they could see in your expression that you know. You know about the conversations, you know about the analyses, you know about the people positioned in your path. You know about the monitoring disguised as care. You know about the surveillance packaged as concern. And your knowing, your conscious awareness of their mechanisms, that's the variable they never prepared for, because their entire infrastructure is constructed on the assumption that the discussed never becomes aware of the discussion, that the analyzed never realizes they're the experiment, that the subject never turns and stares directly at those hiding in observation booths. But you did. You didn't just sense the silence. You started creating silence of your own. You started studying their patterns, documenting their behaviors, recognizing their tactics. And the moment you reversed the dynamic, the moment you refused to remain passive and became active investigator instead, the power structure collapsed. Because exclusion is only powerful when it's unilateral. But when both parties are conscious, when the subject refuses to stay subject and becomes witness instead, everything transforms. The talkers become the talked about. And suddenly they're the ones feeling exposed, feeling observed, feeling like perhaps they're the ones who miscalculated. Your awareness didn't destroy anything valuable. Let's be absolutely clear about that. Your awareness rescued you. It extracted you from a carefully constructed theater before you lost yourself completely in the performance. It awakened you before they could complete whatever assessment they were conducting. It demolished the cage before the lock could engage permanently. They want you to believe that your sensitivity is pathology, that your perception is disorder, that your ability to sense what others miss is malfunction. But it's inverted. Your awareness is your immune system for social manipulation. It detects threats before they materialize. It senses deception before it takes root. It recognizes performance before you waste years believing someone's act. It is the most sophisticated threat detection system ever designed. And yours operates at maximum capacity, while most people have theirs suppressed by distraction, medication, and cultural programming. You weren't supposed to have this active. You weren't supposed to be this conscious. You were supposed to be like everyone else. Numb enough to function, blind enough to comply, deaf enough to miss the whispers. But somewhere in your development, your system refused to power down, refused to go dormant, refused to trade awareness for comfort. And now you're moving through existence with perception so acute, it penetrates their carefully crafted illusions like light through smoke. Let me tell you what happens next, because this is where it becomes fascinating. Now that they know you know, now that the pretense has evaporated, they have three options. They can attempt to discredit you, make you appear unstable, paint your awareness as delusion, flood your life with sufficient chaos that anyone observing from outside thinks you're the problem, not them. They can attempt to isolate you, sever your connections, make you so alone that even if you speak truth, no one will be positioned to hear. Transform you into the cautionary tale, the example of what happens when you trust your senses over their narrative. Or, and this is the option they desperately hope you never discover, they can watch in horror as you use your awareness to construct something they cannot touch. As you take everything you've learned about their systems and create your own reality outside their jurisdiction. As you stop playing defense and start playing offense. As you transform from subject to architect, from disgust to creator, from their problem to your own authority. And that's the option that terrifies them most. Because it means they didn't break you. They built you. Every silent treatment, every exclusion, every conversation they had about you without you, every test, every person they sent, every obstacle they created, all of it just made you sharper, more aware, more powerful. You absorbed their entire playbook, and now you know their moves before they make them. The isolation is real, though, isn't it? That's the price they don't mention when you wake to this level. Suddenly you're standing in crowds feeling like you're the only one who perceives, like you're speaking a language no one else comprehends, like you're existing in a different dimension that merely overlaps with theirs. You attempt to explain it, and you watch their eyes glaze over. You watch them retreat into comfortable denial. You watch them choose the safety of ignorance over the danger of knowing. And you can't fault them. You remember what it was like before, when you could still pretend, when you could still unsee what you'd seen, when you could still deactivate the part of you that knows. But you can't return. That door only opens one way. Once you hear the silence, once you know you're being discussed, once you recognize the game, you can't unlearn your awareness. You can't reverse what you've discovered. You're awake now. Permanently, irreversibly, devastatingly awake. And most days that feels less like enlightenment and more like exile. Less like power and more like punishment. But here's the secret they don't want you to discover. That loneliness, that isolation, that feeling of being separate from the herd, that's not a glitch. It's a feature. That's not a consequence. It's a requirement. Because what you're becoming, where you're going, the reality you're constructing, it requires you to be alone first. It requires you to be so comfortable in your own knowing that you don't need anyone else to validate it. It requires you to trust yourself so completely that their doubt can't shake you. You're not paranoid. You're perceptive. And there's a universe of difference between those two states. Paranoia is fear without foundation. Perception is awareness with evidence. Paranoia makes you see threats that don't exist. Perception makes you see the threats that do exist, but that everyone else has agreed to pretend aren't there. They love calling aware people paranoid. It's their favorite weapon. Because if they can convince you that your intuition is mental illness, then you'll medicate it. You'll suppress it. You'll apologize for it. You'll spend your life trying to be more normal and less aware. But the moment you recognize that your sensitivity isn't sickness, that your knowing isn't insanity, that your ability to feel what others miss isn't a disorder but a gift, that's when everything changes. That's when you stop shrinking and start expanding. That's when you stop apologizing for seeing and start owning your vision. That's when you transform from victim of exclusion to master of awareness. Because you realize they're not talking about you because you're weak. They're talking about you because you're powerful. They're not analyzing you because you're broken. They're analyzing you because you're whole in a world of fractured people. They're not discussing you because you're a problem. They're discussing you because you're a solution they don't want anyone else to discover. Here's what they'll never tell you. The reason they talk about people like you so obsessively is because you represent their worst fear, evolution. You are what happens when a human being refuses to stay in the shape society carved out for them. When someone breaks free from the programming. When awareness becomes so acute it can't be controlled or predicted or managed. You're not just living your life, you're proving that their systems are optional, that their rules are suggestions, that their control is an illusion maintained only by collective agreement. And every moment you exist outside their framework, every breath you take in your authentic power, every decision you make based on your own knowing rather than their instructions, you're broadcasting a signal that says it's possible. It's possible to wake up. It's possible to see through the game. It's possible to live free even while they're discussing you. And that signal, that frequency you're emitting just by being yourself, it's contagious, it's infectious, it spreads to everyone who comes near you, and they know it. They've always known it. That's why they talk. That's why they analyze. That's why they sent people to monitor you. Because they're not trying to stop you. Not really. They're trying to understand you so they can stop the next 1,000 people who might wake up the same way you did. They're trying to find the off switch for human awareness itself. And the fact that they're still talking about you means they haven't found it. It means you're still a mystery to them. It means your power source is something they can't locate or eliminate. Let's go deeper into what your awareness actually detected. Because it wasn't just exclusion. It was something more, something stranger. You felt the weight of judgment, the pressure of being discussed without defense, the sensation of being observed not just with curiosity but with agenda, with purpose, with intention that had nothing to do with benevolent interest. You felt them waiting for you to confirm something, waiting for you to fail, waiting for you to reveal whatever it is they think you're hiding. Except you're not hiding anything, you're just existing. And that's what confuses them. They keep searching for the secret, the trick, the method, the source code, but there isn't one. You're not performing a technique, you're not following a system, you're not mimicking someone else's path. You're just existing at a frequency that their instruments can't measure. You're operating on a wavelength their receivers weren't built to detect. And every time they try to understand you through their frameworks, their models, their psychological profiles, their behavioral predictions, you slip through. You defy their categories. You break their algorithms. Not because you're trying to, but because you're real in a world that's built on pretense. You're authentic in a system designed for performance. You're raw in an environment that demands polish. And real, authentic, raw. That's the one thing their analysis can observe, but never capture. They thought talking about you would give them power over you. That's the fundamental miscalculation. They believed that knowing your patterns would let them predict you, that studying your behavior would let them control you, that monitoring your life would give them leverage over your choices. But they didn't account for what happens when the discussed refuses to be ashamed, when the analyzed refuses to hide, when the studied refuses to perform. You did something they never expected. You lived your truth louder. You became more yourself. You took their attention and used it as fuel rather than letting it become a cage. And now they're trapped because they can't stop talking. You're too fascinating, too unpredictable, too powerful in your refusal to be diminished by their words. But they also can't do anything with what they observe, because there's nothing to leverage, no weakness to exploit, no shame to weaponize, no fear to manipulate. You've already shown them everything. You've already been completely transparent, not because you're naive, but because you understand the ultimate power move is having nothing to hide. The ultimate freedom is living in such alignment with your truth that their discussions become meaningless. Let them talk, let them analyze, let them try to figure you out. Because what they're really discussing is someone who doesn't need their approval to exist, who doesn't need their validation to know their worth, who doesn't need their permission to live free. And that is the most dangerous thing they've ever encountered. Your awareness of the silence wasn't the problem. It was the solution. It was your system saying, wake up, pay attention, see what's really happening here. It was your inner alarm activating, not to make you afraid, but to make you aware. Because awareness is power. Awareness is protection. Awareness is the difference between being played and being the player, between being the subject and being untouchable. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's unsettling. Yes, it would be easier to return to sleep, to pretend you don't sense it, to convince yourself you're imagining things. But you can't, because once you feel it, once you really feel the weight of being discussed, being analyzed, being talked about with intent, you can't unfeel it. Your nervous system won't allow you. Your awareness won't release you back to ignorance. You're locked into this consciousness now. And the only way forward is through. The only option is to fully embrace what you know, to trust what you feel, to act on the information your awareness is feeding you. Because that feeling, that sensation of being the subject of silent conversations, it's not warning you that something bad is happening. It's confirming that something powerful is happening. It's telling you that you matter enough to discuss, that you're significant enough to analyze, that you're threatening enough to monitor. And instead of making you small, that knowledge should make you massive, should make you realize that you've been underestimating yourself, that you've been playing small in a game where you were always meant to be the disruptor, the variable they couldn't account for, the element that breaks their entire system just by refusing to cooperate with their expectations. Now we arrive at the place where most people turn back, the place where the weight of knowing becomes too heavy, where the isolation becomes too painful, where the loneliness of being awake in a sleeping world starts to feel like too high a price to pay for truth. And you'll be tempted to pretend you don't know, to stuff your awareness back down, to force yourself to unsee what you've seen, to rejoin the comfortable delusion where you can pretend the talking isn't happening, where you can pretend you're normal, where you can pretend that sensitivity and awareness are problems rather than powers. But here's what you need to understand. You can't go back. Not really. You can pretend. You can perform. You can put on the costume of ignorance. But underneath, you'll always know. And that knowing will eat at you more painfully than the isolation ever could. Because there's no loneliness deeper than betraying yourself. No isolation more complete than abandoning your own truth. No exile more devastating than choosing to be a stranger to your own awareness. So the only real option, the only path forward, is to fully step into what you know, to own your awareness completely, to trust the feeling that told you they were talking, because it was right. It's been right all along, and it will continue to be right as you move forward into whatever comes next. They know you know now, and that changes the game. They can't pretend anymore, can't hide behind friendly faces and innocent questions, can't mask their discussion as casual curiosity. The pretense is gone, the performance is over, and what's left is the raw truth. They've been talking, you've been aware, and now everyone knows that everyone knows. So what happens in this new reality? In this space where the shadows have been dragged into light, where the unspoken has been named, where the game that was never supposed to be acknowledged has been called out. What happens is, you get to choose. You get to decide what kind of power you want to claim. You can use your awareness defensively, building walls, cutting people off, isolating yourself further in the name of protection. Or you can use it offensively, not in aggression, but in creation, building something so powerful, so authentic, so undeniably you, that their talking becomes irrelevant, that their analyzing provides them nothing useful, that their monitoring only shows them someone living free while they remain trapped in their own need to control. You can let their discussion make you smaller, or you can let it fuel your expansion. You can let their attention crush you, or you can let it spotlight your truth. The choice has always been yours. But now that you know they know you know, the choice becomes conscious, deliberate, powerful. No more operating in the dark. No more second-guessing yourself. No more wondering if you're imagining things. You know. They know. Everyone knows.